So with that, we will begin our sponsor portion of Judiciary Committee, beginning with Senate Bill 248 by Senator Acosta, an act relating to financial institutions, powers and operations. Do I have Senator Acosta on?
Yes, Chair, I'm right here. How you doing?
Very good. You may proceed.
Chairman, may I ask, do you want me to present this bill on its own? I have the next three as well. I could,
Yes.
address them all or whatever's easier for you.
Yes, I would like that, but before addressing them, please state the bill number, if you will, and we'd like to know if there's any questions between each of the bills. So I see that you have Senate Bill 248, 394, 399, and 400. You may proceed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I want to start by thanking my colleague, Representative Joshua Giraldo, for submitting companions to all these bills on the House side. He and I, you'll hear me echo some of the things he's already shared on the other side for those of you who might have listened to those hearings. And we spent years working on some of these things. It's an honor to be fighting alongside him and so many others, like the Interfaith Coalition, Amor Never Again Action, Fuerza Laboral, Progreso Latino, and just to name a few here. So I want to be careful to avoid hyperbole. I did get called out last week, and the professorial approach is a kind of hazard of the profession. But I will say this, that it is necessary to briefly address the historical context from which these bills emerge. Because in many ways it is debatable, but could be possible that it was better to be a poor person of color in 1968 than in 1988. So I want to briefly say that in the 1980s and 90s, we have the intersection of the dismantling of the social welfare system, an exponential growth in economic inequality, the rise of deviance, and the emergence of this new philosophy of being tough on crime. And it's important that we acknowledge that these things were something that all sides agree on. It was bipartisan to be tough on crime. The first big crime bill was under a Republican president, George H.W. Bush, approved by Congress, and the follow-up was by a Democratic president, right, a Democrat, Bill Clinton, also largely popular in Congress. And 30 years later, we're just starting to acknowledge that we made a huge mistake. Republicans and Democrats alike have now noticed that we became a carceral state.
Senator Acosta, please
yes,
address the bills. Senate Bill number 248, please.
So let me say that Rhode Island's role in this has not been as pronounced as other states, but that does not mean that there's no blood on our leg. So I want to say Senate Bill 248 prohibits financial institutions from investing in private detention centers or continuing to invest with any institution, company, or subsidiary of a company that owns or contracts with a government entity to manage or run a prison. Now, to our knowledge, and based on folks who work here at the State House, there are no banks to which this currently applies. And so this bill is more symbolic than anything else, but it puts our state on the right side of history and follows the path of divestment from fossil fuels and weapons manufacturers that have been making headlines in our state over the last couple of years. And so shout out to the treasurer for the divestment moves his office has made with our pension system. This bill follows suit with something that New York State did in the last couple of years, and it sends the message that financial institutions in our state should not profit from the private detention of human beings. Senate Bill 394.
Excuse me, Senator Acosta, does any of the committee members have any questions on Senate Bill number 248? Okay, seeing none at this time, Senate Bill number 394, entitled An Act Relating to State Affairs and Government Corrections Department. Go ahead, Senator Acosta.
This provides for a safety inspection of the Wyatt Detention Facility twice a year. It should be noted that this would be housed in the Department of Administration. I would argue that the details of what the safety inspection should be looking for is something that we need to iron out, but we have heard disturbing reports about private prisons cutting corners on inmate care and sacrificing safety to improve the bottom line. There have been over 500 reported cases of COVID-19 among staff and inmates held at the Wyatt Detention Center, and so regular unannounced inspections would go a long way towards ensuring that private prisons, in this case, this quasi-public private entity, we're all paying for and subsidizing through their tax-exempt status, I would argue, are doing what they're supposed to be doing in treating inmates humanely.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions of committee members on this bill? Okay, seeing none at this time, Senate Bill number 399, an act relating to towns and cities, municipal detention facility corporations. Go ahead, Senator.
So this bill prohibits the operation of private detention facilities and private-public partnerships within the state, and also prohibits the housing of Rhode Island prisoners in other states, as well as holding out-of-state prisoners in our own facility. In practice, what this bill does is it repeals the Municipal Detention Facility Corporations Law and prohibits the operation of private detention facilities and those partnerships within the state. The bill does not seek to immediately close the facility that is currently operating and does respect existing contract law by including a sunset provision that gives them until December 31st, 2028. I'd be happy to answer questions regarding that particular facility's relationship to the municipality of Central Falls or about the broader goal of the bill as well.
Any question of committee? Yes, Senator Reptakis.
Madam Chair, to the sponsor, what happens if we have to remove a prisoner for his safety to another state? Say we have to move him out of state because something happened in his crime and there's an issue of his jeopardy of life in that facility.
That's a great question, Senator Raptakis, and it's something I've been in conversation with the Attorney General's office, because if you look at the testimony that we received from Director Coyne, one of the troubling remarks that she makes in this is that, according to her, the directors of corrections have full sole discretion over the transfer of an inmate. Now, that's only partially true. The state of California has already passed a bill that mirrors this present bill draft. What I would say is what we need is actually a guideline or a set of protocols that articulates explicitly the process by which somebody gets moved. So it doesn't just become, well, this director doesn't like this particular inmate, they could just move them, thereby making the process of incarceration that much more inhumane, making it harder for family to visit them, and so on and so forth. I think we need, in law, a process for how these decisions are made, rather than just say we trust the person to exercise their discretion at their will.
Thank you. Any other questions of committee members? Okay, seeing none, Senator Acosta, you have the last of your bills, 400, an act relating to state affairs and government. You may proceed.
Sure. So this bill prohibits contracts with private, for-profit prison facilities or with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. The bill would get us out of the business of immigration enforcement. Our limited history in this realm has been tainted by mistreatment, dangerous conditions, poor oversight, and even death, as you can see in the article that I forwarded for the public record. So if you have questions about that particular incident, the related incidents, or the fact that we're currently spending between $120 to $140 per day per inmate of taxpayer dollars, be happy to answer those as well.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? No questions of committee members. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for your explanation of the bills. I appreciate that. Next, we're going to move to Senate Bill number 539 by Senator Mack, an act relating to education, preventing discrimination on the basis of race. Senator Mack. Okay, I believe she's on
Chair Coyne, is that me?
Yes. Welcome to the committee, Senator Mack. You have two bills up. Senate Bill number 539, an act relating to education, preventing discrimination on the basis of race. If you want to explain that, we'll see if any committee members have any questions, and then we'll move to 772 of yours.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Coyne and members of the Judiciary Committee, aka my favorite committee. I'm here, it looks like, every week. This bill, affectionately known as the Crown Act, is to help support identifying prejudice based on hairstyle and hair texture in the face. The bill has been taken in 7 different states so far who have passed the Crown Act, and in 2020, H.R. 5309 was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives. This bill may not seem super important to some folks, but this is a really huge impact in folks who show up to the workplace, particularly Black and brown women who show up to the workplace. In 2016, the 11th Circuit determined that it was not a civil rights violation to discriminate against someone based on their hair type or texture. But Black women are 3.4 times more likely to be perceived as unprofessional due to their hair, 30% more likely to be made aware of formal workplace appearance policy, 1.5 times more likely to be sent home from the workplace because of their hair, 83% more likely to report being judged more harshly on their looks than others, and then 80% more likely to change their natural hair to fit into their office. And whether this is a perceived bias or an unconscious bias, I think it is important that we work to make sure that all folks in our workforce are protected, whether or not it is a characteristic linked to their race or ethnicity, which we can contribute to hairstyle. And I will move on to my next bill.
Let me just, excuse me, Senator, if I
sorry.
could just ask if there are any questions of committee members. Seeing none at this time, you may proceed with 772, an act relating to state affairs and government corrections department. Please proceed.
Yeah, so this bill was actually brought to me by some currently incarcerated folks at the ACI. The purpose of this bill is to really address one of the main reasons why folks return to prisons, our prison recidivism rate. Oftentimes it's because people who are currently incarcerated do not have constant and meaningful contact with their families. Establishing a tablet program that has phone capabilities for incarcerated individuals will, one, increase their ability to communicate with their families and other supports on the outside, and will be linked to lower recidivism rate in the future. For example, people who are incarcerated who had more contact with their families and who reported positive relationships overall are less likely to be reincarcerated. And then helping people who are incarcerated maintain family ties while incarcerated shows that an individual is more likely to keep their job after prison and to ease the harm of their family members that they've been separated from. This also would come at no cost to the state. Establishing a tablet program with phone capabilities and video messaging would be completely on the families and the people who are currently incarcerated, similar to what currently happens with our telephones. I was at the ACI just this week, and I saw on my visit on Wednesday that many folks who are currently incarcerated, there are very limited number of phones that they have access to, inside and outside. And as you can imagine, in a New England winter, even with some of the warmer winters we had, folks congregating around anywhere between 15 and 20 phones that are outside for 20-minute phone calls to contact their loved ones is the only meaningful interaction they get with these folks on the outside. So this program would really allow us to have more robust communication between folks who are inside and outside, and eventually lead to fewer recidivism.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Any questions of committee members? Okay, seeing none at this time, thank you for joining us this evening. And finally, we have Senate Bill number 542 by Leader McCaffrey, an act relating to criminals, correctional institutions. Parole provides that for parole violations that don't involve a new criminal offense, the right to a final parole revocation hearing not involving new criminal offenses may be waived if the violator admits to the violation and accepts the sanctions imposed. Okay? So we've introduced that. Okay, now what I'd like to do is I'd like to move to the public testimony portion, and we'll go in the order of the bills that we have here. I know several people have signed up for more than one bill. I am going to hold a 3-minute time period for testimony by our public, but I will extend that for some of the members who have 3 and 4 bills that they're testifying on. So I believe the first bill we're going to be taking public testimony on is Bill number 248, an act relating to financial institutions, powers, and operations. And I believe we have Kirk Robinson on the line. Welcome to the committee. I believe we have Kirk Robinson on the line, and you will be testifying on Senate Bill 248, 394, and 539. You may have 6 minutes for your testimony on the 3 bills.
Oh, yeah, thanks. That's me, Kirk Robinson, 1111 Eagle Street in Providence. Yeah, I was going to provide testimony for 248, 394, and 400, but I might have accidentally hit
That's
the
okay.
5931.
Proceed.
So, but I'll give it for 48, 94, and 400. and I'll be quick. As far as 48 is concerned, prohibiting financial institutions from investing in private detention centers. Yeah, I support that. I don't think it is. I don't think it's ethical to provide financing or investing in stocks or securities to manage a prison. Like I don't think that corrections should be monetized, right? Because then it creates this profit incentive that can end up that can lead to outcomes that I think are unfavorable to people in general. And if I could get more specific, tying a profit motive to putting people in prison can create the motive to put people in prison maybe shouldn't be there. And that's really concerning. And I think this bill, and also very similar to 400, I think it's fairly, mainstream in the political discourse, right? Like, I want to say the Obama administration, at the end of their second term, issued an executive order to phase out private prisons, if I'm not mistaken. And so, if Obama's the standard bearer for the Democratic Party, I would think a supermajority Democratic legislature here in Rhode Island would be receptive to something like this. So that's for 248. For 400, they include the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE. I think, during the Trump administration, we saw ICE doing some things that were reminiscent of what happens in countries that are non-democratic, failed states, whatever you want to call it. But how ICE was used under the Trump administration was unacceptable in a country and in a state that purports to call itself a democracy, right? I perfectly 100% support prohibiting contracts with the United States with ICE. Just awful. So that's a great bill. I love that. And then let's talk about 394 really quickly for the Wyatt Detention Center. I think it would be great if we could have safety inspections twice a year in Wyatt. I'm not particularly a fan of prisons in general. I'd like to live in a world where maybe we have far, far fewer of them. We over-incarcerate people in the United States at a rate that is not favorably compared to when we think about comparably like other, industrialized countries, or I guess post-industrial at this point in the world. So, but yeah, an unannounced biannual in-person safety inspection throughout the facility. If Wyatt's going to be open, then we at least need to have, as the public, an understanding about safety and oversight in terms of what's going on in the facility. I prefer that Wyatt didn't exist, but if we're going to have it, then in-person safety inspections seem like a pretty low bar here. So, that's it for me. I appreciate the sponsors of these bills, particularly Senator Acosta. I'm really pleased to see him and his colleagues doing this important work. And so that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you
for the opportunity to chat.
Thank you. I don't see any questions at this time. We'll move on to our next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Andrew Poignant on the phone. Is that correct?
Hi, yes, I'm Andrew Poignant.
Okay, and I believe that you're speaking on 248, 394, 399, 400, and 539. You may have 7 minutes for your testimony, sir. You may begin.
Thank you. I'll speak on the 4 of them together and then the 539 separately. So
That's fine.
My name's Andrew Poignant. I'm a resident of Providence, calling in support of 248, 394, 399, and 400. One of my really close friends, he was undocumented, and one of his ex-girlfriends was upset that he ended up dating another girl at the time, another woman at the time, and ended up calling the cops on him, and he ended up, because of his status, he was in jail for almost a year before he even went to trial. And then after everything was acquitted, and he was found innocent, he ended up having to go into immigration detention center, and the whole process really changed him from being a happy and funny guy, and he was never the same after that, and just like seeing how it all affected him, I don't want us as a state to be supporting any of these facilities, and so I support all 4 of those bills to try to reduce the make it less likely that we'll have them here, as well as making it safer until we're able to fully get rid of the Wyatt Detention Center and make sure that we no longer have any private or quasi-public detention facilities. I'm also calling in favor of Bill 539. Someone who's really close to me had in their first job interview straight out of college with 3.97 GPA. They had an interview, and during the interview, the person interviewing them commented in a way saying, "Oh, we do drug tests here. Are you going to be able to pass?" And then never ended up calling them back after. And shortly after that, and that was at a place right down the street from them. And then shortly after that, they ended up changing their hairstyle and having to cut a lot of it off and completely changing their hairstyle. They ended up applying to a very similar position, but significantly further away from their house. And with the grades in their resume and everything, they ended up getting the job. But it was further and everything else. And this discrimination happens, and I would hope that we as a state would like to eliminate that from happening. So I'm calling in support of all of these bills. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I don't see any questions of committee members at this time. We'll now move to the next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have David Valise representing Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, who will be speaking on Senate Bill 248, 400, and 399. If you could state your name again, you have 6 minutes for your testimony, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and committee members, for having me. My name is David Valise. I'm the director and lead organizer for the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, a coalition of faith leaders of many different faiths, congregations, and advocates in Rhode Island that are unified in fighting poverty and inequality. As mentioned, we are here to support Senate Bills 248, 399, and 400. We are here to also uplift the voices of those who cannot currently raise their voice and to speak against the profiteering from the incarceration of human beings and against the criminalization of the immigration process and against a broken and unequal justice system. First, let's think about the immoral concept of profiteering from prisons for a second. To have shareholders attached to the imprisonment of human beings is immoral because it puts value on not rehabilitation or diversion, but on conviction and continued incarceration. Even if people say that that is not the purpose, the fact that it's reliant on each other is problematic and cannot be overlooked. This is a partnership that shouldn't exist and one that we do not need and we do not want in Rhode Island. In one of our sacred texts, it says, continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. So I mention again, we do not want any private prisons in Rhode Island. We also are against the criminalization of the immigration process. Many people held at detention centers are there because they are waiting an immigration hearing. These are human beings who are in this country seeking a better life. And while they wait for the process, we incarcerate them. And in the case of the Wyatt Detention Center, for example, we put them across the street from a high school athletics field in a city that is 80% immigrant families. It is not okay, and it is not the Rhode Island or the America I believe in. We believe that Rhode Island should have no contracts with ICE. All of the different texts from the different faiths of our coalition have countless examples of why we must take care and uplift our immigrant communities. One says we must love all foreigners like we love ourselves because we were all foreigners once ourselves. So please pass these bills. We need them. We don't want any contracts with ICE or private prisons in Rhode Island. Thank you for your support, and thank you to Senator Acosta for introducing them and for all who signed on, and all of you have a blessed evening.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. I don't see any questions at this time. We'll now move to our next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Jacqueline Goldman, who will be...
That is correct.
Thank you, and welcome. I believe you're speaking on Senate Bill 248, 394, 399, 400, 539. You have 7 minutes to address all of those, and you may begin.
Okay, I'm going to take nowhere near as long as that, but thank you so much for giving me all of that time.
Of course.
So my name is Jacqueline Goldman, and I'm here to support all of the bills that were just mentioned, firmly because I believe that we need to shut down the Wyatt Detention Center. This is a site that is unsafe and where people who are locked up are facing just cruel and corrupt, cruel conditions that are sort of created because of corrupt institutions that are making a lot of money off of the people that they detain. And so I think that between the required safety inspection, making sure that we don't have cooperation with ICE, and with like different police departments, I think that this is a really good step in making sure that people in our state have some, have better, are not subject to the state violence that is perpetuated by these kinds of institutions. And then speaking about Bill 539, I think that this is a no-brainer. What we need to be doing is minimizing discrimination that happens every single day for Black and Brown communities, and this bill is a step to take that would sort of end some discrimination that people face on a daily basis. And so that's really all I wanted to say, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear my testimony and the testimony of so many other people.
Oh, of course. Any questions of committee members? Okay, I don't see any at this time. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Now we are going to move to addressing Senate Bill 399, an act relating to towns and cities municipal detention facility corporation. I believe the first witness is Anna Fetta. Welcome to welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes for your testimony on 399. You may begin.
Okay, thanks. Hi. My name is Anna Fetter. I'm a film curator, a documentary filmmaker, and educator, and I've been a Rhode Island resident since 2015. I'm also an American Jew who believes the lesson of the Holocaust, never again, means never again for anyone. The detention of migrants in a place like the Wyatt for the crime of crossing an imaginary border in search of a better life and not possessing a document is our collective shame. I personally witnessed the violence of guards employed by the Wyatt at a peaceful protest at the facility in August 2019 when Captain Thomas Woodworth intentionally drove his truck into a group of seated protesters, a crime for which he has never been brought to justice. He was joined by several of his colleagues and attacked people of conscience from 15 to 80 years old with pepper spray, a chemical weapon, for standing in front of a parking lot entrance on a public sidewalk. If this is the violence that this institution is capable of enacting on a group of mostly white, entirely peaceful citizens, with several cameras recording the incident, I shudder to think of the violence being perpetrated behind those walls and out of sight of the public and the concern for justice. I don't believe prisons should be able to profit off of locking up our community members. Places like the Wyatt Detention Center imprisons people in unsafe conditions and disproportionately target immigrants and people of color. These inhumane institutions have no place in Rhode Island or really anywhere. So I urge you to pass SO 99, SO 400, and SO 248 out of committee and bring them to the Senate floor for a vote this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement and your testimony. Any questions of committee members? Okay,
No, that's it. I'll be watching. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome. Next, I believe we have Benjamin Cooley Hall. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. Did I get the name right?
Yes, that's right.
Very good. You may begin your testimony on 399.
Thank you. My name is Benjamin Cooley Hall. I'm a resident of Providence. I lived here for 19 years, and I'm calling to voice my strong support of Senate Bill 399. From my perspective, and I gather from the perspective of many, both within Central Falls and the wider Rhode Island community, the Wyatt Detention Center has been a disaster. It was, excuse me. It was sold as an economic rescue for the troubled city, and it's brought exactly the opposite. It's brought more debt, which then the city was considered somehow responsible for. But equally importantly, it places the city in a really unjust, untenable situation where now the Wyatt itself is contractually bound to maintain a certain level of capacity. So it's financially not only incentivized but compelled legally to fill its detention beds with whoever it can, and so for both of those reasons, it's locking up our neighbors, and it's putting our neighbors in Central Falls in continuing further and further worse financial situations. So Senate Bill 399 would turn this disastrous corner around and get us back on a better road for Central Falls and for Rhode Islanders. So I urge the members to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Seeing no questions of committee members, we'll proceed to the next witness.
Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Libby Merrill. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Libby Merrill. I'm a resident of East Providence, Rhode Island, and a lifelong Rhode Islander, and I'm testifying tonight on behalf of myself. I'm testifying in support of Senate Bills 399, 400, and 248. I am in support of closing the Wyatt when the current contract runs out. We should not be imprisoning people in the state of Rhode Island on behalf of ICE, and furthermore, private banks should not be profiting from the imprisonment of anyone due to their immigration status, especially not in my home state of Rhode Island. I was present at the protest in August of 2019, demanding the immediate closure of the Wyatt. I still support that we close the Wyatt prison, and that going forward, the state of Rhode Island is not complicit in imprisoning people who are trying to immigrate to this country and creating profit for private banks on behalf of imprisoning our fellow Rhode Islanders. Please close the Wyatt and make it impossible for Rhode Island to have ongoing contracts with ICE and for Rhode Island banks to profit from the imprisonment of human beings. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Seeing no questions at this time, we'll now move to the next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the committee. I believe we have Liza Birkin on the phone. You have 3 minutes for your testimony on 399. You may begin.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Liza Birkin. I'm a Jewish American living in Providence. My uncle's father, Hertz Hirschberg, recently died at the age of 92. He was able to live such a long life because of a man named Oskar Schindler, who helped him escape the atrocities of the Holocaust, which might have cut his young life short. As Jews, we learn the phrase never again from a young age. We learn to idolize people like Schindler, who had no real skin in the game himself, but was just fighting for the inherent dignity and value of all human life. When we have drawn comparisons between the Holocaust and the detention of migrants and other people in camps at the border and institutions like the Wyatt, and behind the IDF military checkpoints in Palestine, we have been called overdramatic and inconsiderate, sometimes even by fellow Jews. But this is not about the end of the Holocaust. It's about the beginning. It's about the dehumanization and systematic indignity that led to the so-called final solution. And is there anything more dehumanizing than allowing private companies and their bondholders to make a profit off of the detention and caging of human beings, whose profit depends on cost-cutting measures to basic human needs like food, clothing, and medicine? The Wyatt was the first quasi-private prison in the country, and it has been nothing but a massive mistake, a stain on Rhode Island's history. We are supposed to be a place of religious and cultural tolerance and of freedom from tyranny. You have the power to finally correct this mistake. In the Fox Point neighborhood, there is a monument with a quote from Roger Williams that reads, "And having a sense of God's merciful providence unto me in my distress, called the place Providence, I desired it might be a shelter for persons distressed for conscience." How would our founder feel about the Wyatt? Please support Senate Bill 399 and 400 and let us close this institution and prevent others like it from ever occupying a piece of Rhode Island land again. Never again. Let us close the legal loophole that allows the Wyatt to remain open despite a ban on private prisons from the Biden administration. Let us put the end date on the Wyatt so the city of Central Falls can begin planning for a better use of this public land. Finally, please support Senate Bill 248 to prevent Rhode Island banks from investing in private prisons and further implicating our state in this dystopian industry. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your testimony. I don't see any hands raised or questions from committee members. Thank you again for joining us this evening. We'll now move to Matthew Derby. Welcome to the committee. I believe we have Matthew Derby on the line. You have 3 minutes for your testimony, sir. You may begin.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm a resident of Pawtucket, and I am urging you to pass S0399. As Rhode Islanders, we are asked to take pride in the belief that our state is the birthplace of religious freedom, tolerance, and independence. But we are never going to be free as long as we allow facilities like the Wyatt to continue to profit from the imprisonment of our community members. Our descendants are going to judge our actions the same way that we judge those who supported slavery in the past. And I am not comfortable continuing to support an inhumane facility like the Wyatt because I don't think that's how we want our story to be written as Rhode Islanders. Thank you very much.
And thank you, sir, for your testimony. Seeing no questions, we will now move to our next, which is Rachel Bishop, I believe. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Rachel Bishop. You have 3 minutes for your testimony, ma'am. You may begin.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Members of the committee and Chairperson Coyne, I am here today because I would like to testify in support of SB 0399, 0400, and 0248. Reason I would like to support those bills is because I think this is a time in our history where we have a choice of what kind of state and frankly what kind of country we're going to be, and whether we think it's the right decision to continue to spend millions of dollars locking away our neighbors and our friends and family. I personally had a lot of friends who were at a protest at the Wyatt Detention Center when one of the officers there, the correctional officers, drove a car straight into those people. And seeing the willingness of someone to do that in front of cameras with a bunch of, to be frank, fairly well-to-do, mostly white people, left me pretty horrified to think what's happening inside to families who are disempowered, who are immigrants, who do not have the resources and people looking out for them, and what's happening behind closed doors. And of course, we know there have been tremendous efforts of the people who are being held inside to protest and do hunger strikes, and that this detention facility is honestly a shame on our state, that it is nationally known as a place of pretty torturous conditions for innocent people, between the freezing cells, uncontrolled COVID, a pattern of violence, unaccountable retaliation from the guards. This is a shame on our state, and we can close it, and we must. And that is why I really urge you to support Bill 0399. And similarly, I think our state needs to stop any new contract with private prisons or ICE, who should not be profiting by putting people behind bars. It is a terrible use of money. It is much better spent on our schools. Money's better spent on resources to keep people from being homeless and to keep people from many of the kinds of desperate living conditions that drive them to crime in the first place. This is not complicated. This is something that we know and have seen in other places has started to work. We have seen decarceration efforts start to work from places from Colorado to Chicago to Massachusetts. When you decarcerate and you get people out and you shift money towards communities, you actually make everybody safer. So I would urge you, please, to support these three bills. And I appreciate the time to hear my testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. Seeing no questions at this time, we'll move to the next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Nathan Levin Aspenson representing Never Again, Rhode Island. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may begin.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm calling tonight to testify in favor of the bills that are before the committee tonight to sunset the contract for the Wyatt Detention Center, as well as make it illegal for banks and government agencies to ever do business with ICE in Rhode Island again. And my reasoning for that is incredibly simple. It is wrong on the face of it to fund an organization that terrorizes our immigrant communities. We've been working on this cause to shut down this facility for a fraction of the amount of time that the people who live in Central Falls that are working on this cause have been trying to remove it. It has already cost one life. It is only a matter of time before it costs another. We know that the sanitation is lacking and the conditions are unsafe, and the people responsible for safeguarding the safety of the people inside were willing to run down a group of peaceful protesters outside their facility. This is a miserable edifice that stands near places of play, near schools. It literally and figuratively towers over the community of Central Falls, and we've heard over and over again. What is this like for the people who live there to have the shadow of ICE over their community, knowing that immigration could be coming to take away family members, could be coming to take away children, could be coming to take away parents at any time? And that is not something we should be in the business of in the state of Rhode Island or anywhere. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony this evening. I appreciate it. Seeing no questions at this time, we'll move to our next witness.
Thank you. June last?
Yes.
Yes, welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm June. You should close the Wyatt. I don't know what exactly the numbers are, but close it. Also, Invesco is the company that has the primary share in the prison and has since 2005, I think. They're headquartered in Atlanta, and they also have offices in Massachusetts and Rochester, New York, which is a place that they control the investment in the Wyatt. And they also have a connection to Rhode Island. If you have a kid and you are saving for college through Rhode Island, that means that you are saving through Invesco. You should maybe ask the treasurer what's up with that, because he's in charge of that, and he could close that contract if he wanted to, if he got pressure to, and yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from any members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you. Have a nice evening. Our next caller is David Oppenheimer. Good evening, David Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Yes, welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes. You may proceed.
Excuse me, I can't hear you.
Welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes and you may proceed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Welcome.
My name is David Oppenheimer. I live in North Kingstown, and I want to address how private prisons in general work. Private prisons provide less training for workers and pay lower salaries to COs and staff than public prisons do. They provide less palatable and nutritious food and fewer programs for prisoners. They provide poorer health care with less highly trained staff than public prisons do. But somehow states on average wind up paying 10% more per prisoner to private prisons. And this happens even though private prisons have the right to reject prisoners, so the sickest and most violent are in the public system. Private prison contracts with states usually contain bed quota clauses, guaranteeing the state will pay a private prison for a certain percentage of beds in the prison every day, even if they are not filled. This leads to public prison beds being left empty, which costs states more. But more importantly, this perverts the criminal justice system, creating incentives for a state to lock up enough people to fill the beds so they don't look like they're overpaying. And these occupancy clauses shift priorities away from rehabilitation, counseling, and therapy. With the profits made from these contracts, private prisons spend millions on lobbying state legislators to set longer prison terms for crimes, sending contributions to those who support harsher sentences. They also fund ALEC, which writes these laws and conducts campaigns to get these laws passed. In some states, private prisons have bought enough votes to slip clauses into state budget bills, completely changing their contracts, negating clauses that limit profits, or allowing the number of beds in the prison to be expanded, guaranteeing more profits, often causing overcrowding and the mixing of violent offenders with nonviolent ones. So private prisons corrupt the criminal justice system, making it harsher and less safe. Cost-cutting for profits make conditions in private prisons more dangerous and unhealthy and make them less effective at reforming prisoners. Employees are paid less than in public prisons, and as a result are less qualified, experienced, and competent, creating dangerous and unhealthy situations. Understaffing leads to units being unmonitored, and more than a few private prisons have wards run by gangs. U.S. Justice Department stats cite 49% more riots and attacks on staff, with 65% more incidents of prisoner-on-prisoner violence in private prisons than in public ones. They offer 68% fewer hours of training. Understaffing and poor training lead to the presence of more drugs and contraband in private prisons. Drug addiction levels in private prisons are double those in public ones. Poorly paid staff have been found to be more likely to participate in the sale and distribution of contraband and drugs, and I have like 4 more sentences here. The food in many private prisons is palatable due to the lower food budgets and inexperienced kitchen staff. So the violence, the drug addiction, the lack of programs, poor nutrition and health care, and untrained staff obviously interfere with any efforts toward rehabilitation. Consequently, recidivism rates for private prisons are higher than those of public prisons, which should be of no surprise since the goal of private prisons is profit and filling beds, not rehabilitation or keeping people out of prison. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this gentleman from any members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you. Have a nice evening. Our next caller is Shira Abramovich. Good evening, Shira Abramovich. Good evening, Shira Abramovich. Is she connected? Yes, hello, are you there? I cannot hear you if you're there, Shira Abramovich. All right, we're going to move on. If you can, please call back and we'll get you on. Stand by, please, 1 minute. Our next caller is Catherine Hillary. And Shira, if you're out there, just call back and we'll put you through. Good evening, Catherine Hillary.
Yes.
Yes.
Here I am.
Welcome to the committee.
Hi there.
You have 3 minutes and you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. As you said, my name's Catherine Hillary from Newport. I'm calling in support of Senate Bill 399 with the deepest and heartfelt appreciation to Senators Acosta and Giraldo for introducing it. To have had a for-profit prison anywhere in our great state of Rhode Island is a stain on our democracy. Senator Acosta has rightly stated that, quote, justice should never be a money-making endeavor, unquote. And he likened the institution of this for-profit prison system to the hypothetical horrific image of judges being paid commission for the number of people they convict. Isabel Wilkerson speaks to the process of dehumanization that has gone on in this country since its inception. She wrote the book Caste, The Origin of Our Discontent. She describes caste as the granting or withholding of respect, status, honor, attention, privileges, resources, benefit of the doubt, and human kindness to someone on the basis of their perceived rank or standing in the hierarchy. She talked about the phenomenon of society accepting the conversion of human beings into instruments for profit during slavery and how it did not happen overnight. It required subtle, continuous dehumanization of whole groups of people. Somehow, that has continued on in various forms since slavery, and finally, the majority of Americans can see the evil in incarcerating people into prison systems based on profit. It's wrong, and it has to stop. Rhode Island began this terrible experiment in the country. It has failed, and Rhode Island must lead the country in banning all for-profit prisons, including the Wyatt Detention Center. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any questions for this witness from any members of the committee? Senator Raptakis.
Chairman, not a question for the witness, but do we have a financial statement from this facility, a public financial statement that we can see what the budget looks like in their statement regarding profit loss?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I see Senator
Senator
Acosta's hand
Acosta's.
up, and I'll bet he's got the answer. Senator Acosta.
So I think part of the question is also asking where the money goes, how much is owed, and that's something that we've asked, but we haven't seen publicly yet. And so what we do know is how the revenue is allocated. And so based on a 2015 court proceeding in which the city of Central Falls took the Wyatt Detention Facility, at that point the Central Falls Detention Corporation, to court because they hadn't made a payment since 2009. We know that first, they cover operations. Second, they pay bondholders. And anything left over goes to impact statements, which means the city itself has not received an impact statement, an impact payment since that 2015 payment of $200,000. So they are a tax-exempt entity with unclear finances that you might be able to see some of their reports online, but we don't know. We know that the original bond renegotiation that they underwent after the 2008 death of Jason to do upgrades put their cost at somewhere between $100 million and $120 million in bond debt.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. That was a very detailed analysis. Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you. We're going to go back to our witness whose call dropped, Shira Abramovich, and I believe she's on the line. Good evening, Shira Abramovich.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to the committee. Thanks for calling back. You have 3 minutes and you may proceed.
Great, thank you. My name is Shira. I live in Fox Point. I am the child of 2 immigrants and the grandchild of refugees from the Holocaust. I strongly believe that ICE is a militia that we do not need in the state of Rhode Island. I have met undocumented immigrants. Many of them came here legally, and simply by the difficulty of the system, were not able to secure permanent residency or otherwise able to stay here in a way that we would consider legal. And that is because the U.S. immigration is deeply flawed. My parents, the only reason that they were able to stay here and get permanent residency and citizenship is by the luck of the draw. And I strongly believe that here in Rhode Island, we have no need for contracts with ICE at prisons like the Wyatt. And I urge you, at the next available opportunity in front of you, vote to shut down the Wyatt, pass these bills, and end all ICE. I can tell you firsthand that many of these people are members of our community. They're contributors. They're taxpayers. They do not deserve to be shut up and sent back to places where often they do not have family, they do not have support networks, and they do not deserve to do so, especially in an institution as violent as the Wyatt is. So I really urge you to pass these 3 bills, and I cede the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now proceed to the next witness. Just stand by 1 minute. I believe we have Alexandra Burkhoff representing Never Again Action. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Burkhoff, you have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may begin.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Alexandra Burkhoff, or Sasha, and I'm a 12-year resident of Providence, and I'm also a Russian Jewish daughter of immigrants. At home, we have an old black and white family photo taken in Berdichev, Ukraine. In this photo, my grandmother has her hair cut short because she routinely dressed as a boy to avoid unwanted sexual violence from Cossack soldiers. She immigrated to the United States at age 16, but her father, who stayed behind, was later killed by Cossack soldiers after being forced to dig his own grave. Now, as a white person living in the United States, I know that I am unlikely to be a target of state violence, but my family history makes me acutely aware of what a privilege that is. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is an agent of state violence. It exists to surveil, bully, incarcerate, and abuse not only non-citizen residents of the United States, but also their family members and entire communities. The best-known local example of ICE's horrific actions is the case of Jason Ng, who in 2008 died of liver cancer with a broken spine after guards refused to treat to address his medical issues and instead physically assaulted him. But more mundane cruelties happen every day. The Wyatt incarcerates ICE detainees from across the country with no family or social connections nearby, while sending Rhode Island detainees out of state. Recently, they've done an incredibly poor job managing the COVID-19 outbreak, with 426 reported COVID cases and a population that stays at roughly 550 inmates, and a positivity rate of 62% among the staff. Senate Bills 394 and 399 would specifically address those issues. But even if the Wyatt had a perfect record of health and safety, the fact remains that they contract with ICE, a cruel and inhumane organization. We should set an example for the rest of the country, and by passing Senate Bill 400, kick ICE out of our state. That said, as I've done more research into the Wyatt's history, it's become increasingly clear that the Wyatt's very existence, regardless of any affiliation with ICE, has been a dark spot on our state's history. From the start, the Wyatt, as a quasi-public entity, has had the stated goal of filling as many of its beds as possible in order to bring the highest possible profits to its shareholders. This incentive structure, typical of private prisons, perverts the justice system, as my colleague David Oppenheimer has already talked more extensively about in his testimony tonight. Furthermore, in an attempt to increase its profits, the Wyatt has continually expanded, taking on increased debt to shareholders to do so, and to my knowledge, it has never been able to fill the capacity it has. It was created to provide a source of funding to Central Falls, but due to financial mismanagement, it has not provided any money to them in around a decade. In the meantime, the Central Falls school children have grown up attending football games and rallies with an imposing concrete and barbed wire structure looming over them, an ever-present symbol of state violence in their daily lives, and a municipality where over 60% of the population is Latinx, and many have loved ones who could be targets of ICE. It's for these reasons that I strongly support the passage of all of the bills introduced by Senator Acosta tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And if you have additional words that you would like to add to your testimony, you certainly may send some written testimony in addition to your verbal testimony.
Okay, thank you very much.
With that, I would like to bring on the next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Katerina Lorenzo representing AMOR Network. You have 3 minutes for your testimony, ma'am.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And my name is Katerina Lorenzo. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance to Mobilize Resistance, known as AMOR. We are an alliance of grassroots organizations providing community support in Rhode Island and resisting state-sponsored violence. The Alliance to Mobilize Resistance, AMOR, supports Senators Acosta, Mack, Kalman, Anderson, Kalkin, and Bell bill S399 that would prohibit the operation of private detention center facilities and private-public partnership within the state, and prohibit the housing of Rhode Island prisoners in other states, as well as haul out of the state prisoners in Rhode Island. We are working in the community and also working with people of color. We know that prisons do not provide opportunities for rehabilitation. They only create the condition for traumatization, desensitization, and torture through the practice of solidarity, confinement, insanity, and inhuman living conditions within an institution that normalizes a culture of neglect and abuse. Private prison create a for-profit model that relies on the condition that our society is willing to throw away members of our community. That is something that we don't stand. We really need care of our community. And also, we know that incarceration, especially private prisons, are an attempt of continuing economic system based in cheap labor rooted in this country's history of slavery and exploitation. It is no surprise that a system that grew as a continuation of slavery continues to disproportionately impact people of color. It is well documented that prisons across the country disproportionately imprison black and brown folks for minor crimes and serve longer sentences on average. Then that's why, as a coalition that includes and works with people that were previously incarcerated are currently behind bars and more, we always here to fight against this cage and inhuman against our community. That's why we support and we ask you to pass or vote in favor of this bill to ban private prison in Rhode Island. That is one. And the second one about the bill S400, banning prison contract with ICE. Also, more we support this bill because it will require the Wyatt Detention Center to end its current relationship with ICE. The criminalization of immigration through system of detention and imprisonment is inhuman and does not create the condition for safetyness of our community. Then definitely we don't want ICE in our state. And of course, we want to shut down the Wyatt that is in Central Falls, that is not only affecting Central Falls communities, affecting all of our communities. That's why definitely we are not in favor of that detention center. Also because we know that ICE does not publicly share with their facility if they are open or closed. Moreover, they increase use of private contractors and subcontractors further of use case how billions of taxpayer dollars are distributed and used to negotiate these contracts. Corporations take advantage of their private entity status to invoke reductions regarding funding allocation and avoid directly liability for substandard conditions. And yes, ICE, as always, they manipulate its budget to justify expansion and to seek more contracts. It also seeks to weaken standards in detention centers. With increase is funding from Congress, which will mean more profit for detention contractors, while conditions become even more dangerous for immigrants. Then again, we are in favor of this bill, and thank you to Senator Acosta and the other senator that is supporting this bill.
And thank you
definitely, we want to pass this bill, and thank you for all your support.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Seeing no questions at this time, we'll move to our next witness, which is Gregory Wake-Mulsky, I believe. Welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. I believe it is Gregory Wake-Mulsky. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It is Wax-Mulsky, and you are completely forgiven. There's a lot of syllables there.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You have 3 minutes. You may proceed with your testimony.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your service to the committee, to absolutely everybody in the state, and of course, thank you so much for everybody who's coming out this evening, dialing in, private citizens, public citizens, concerned folks who just have one thing to say: shut it down. There is no space on the planet where we should be keeping people in cages. Absolutely not. It's disgusting. Listen, we've all seen the news the last couple of weeks. We've all been watching the last few years what's been going on our border. We don't want any of that trash in our community. It's disgusting. I speak with people every day from immigrant communities that are in terror of ICE agents showing up at their work, at their playgrounds, coming into their homes, or scooping them up off the street, because those are the images that we see on the news. This is not the 1940s during the Reich. This is America in the 21st century. These are our streets. Whose streets? These are our streets. Up here in Central Falls, in Pawtucket, all over the state, we're telling you, once again, our elected officials, to do what? Not keep it open. Not invest one more red American penny in this institution of violent hatred towards people who just came here fleeing violence, looking for opportunity, and wanting what we call the American dream. Let's make freedom more than a dream, and you can do it. If you don't, it's not going to be good for anybody. It can be so great. We know you're going to do the right thing. Pass 399 and the other bills out of committee that take the funding away from this terrorist organization that we call ICE. Shut down the possibility that they can profit off of human misery. It's wrong, and we thank you for doing so. We all have hearts. We all know right from wrong. That is my time tonight, and thank you again for having us all here.
Thank you very much for your testimony this evening. We appreciate it. We will now move to our next witness. I believe we have Steve Alquist from Uprise, Rhode Island on the phone. Welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a reporter for Uprise, and I've been covering the public's efforts to close the Wyatt for a few years now. I was there when a prison guard drove his pickup truck to protesters outside the Wyatt and watched as more prison guards exited the prison to assault protesters. I've been at the Wyatt for every protest, and I've watched as the Wyatt governing board, the CFDFC, was taken over by the Wyatt bondholders to protect their investments. The official word is that the Wyatt is a non-profit, quasi-public facility. It is not a for-profit private prison. But is this really true? The enabling legislation passed by the Rhode Island General Assembly established the Wyatt as a quasi-public corporation. This means the Wyatt has a duty to the public good as well as the duty to the investors. It should be noted that the term quasi-public and the term quasi-private are synonymous. The choice of one word over the other to describe facilities like the Wyatt is a conscious choice. It is wordsmithing for propaganda. What is the duty that the Wyatt owes the people of Central Falls? That duty is to generate money for the city. We can call the payments the Wyatt must send to the city a lot of things, but the money paid is a result of profit. For the past several years, the Wyatt has been in the red, so it has not been making payments to Central Falls because the Wyatt has been unprofitable. There are invested in the Wyatt a group of bondholders. These bondholders are financial entities that have invested around $100 million in the Wyatt, and they expect a return on their investment. The return comes in the form of profit made by the prison. So we can say nonprofit all we want, but as it can be plainly seen from its inception, the Wyatt has always been about making money, profit for Central Falls and for investors. As for the Wyatt not being a private prison, this claim also fails under scrutiny. The prison has been legally defined as a quasi-public, but, as I mentioned earlier, hidden in the term quasi-public is the idea that half the interests in the facility are private interests. Just how powerful is the public board that runs the Wyatt, the Central Falls Detention Facility Corporation? When the CFDFC voted to cancel the contract with ICE a few years ago, bondholders sued public officials, including the sponsor of the bill under consideration tonight, and went to court to enforce that contract. Bondholders, private interests, did this to ensure their profit. The courts overwhelmingly supported the bondholders, the private side of the quasi-public, over the CFDFC, the public side. The court further mandated that the CFDFC vote to undo the cancellation of the ICE contract. In other words, private interests forced public operators to do their business bidding for profit. The CFDFC had no choice but to vote the way they were directed to by the bondholders through the court. The public side of the question was shown to be the public side of the equation was shown to be illusory. The Wyatt was, and was always planned to be a for-profit prison. Essentially, the Wyatt is now run by the bondholders through the power of the court. The bondholders tell the CFDFC how to vote. The Wyatt now runs with an eye only towards profit. The Wyatt was the first quote-unquote non-profit quasi-public facility in the United States, but these words are just Orwellian newspeak, and we really shouldn't let them get away with the idea that they are not accountable, that they are somehow not a private prison or somehow not for profit. And so that ends my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And as I've mentioned to other witnesses, if you have more that you would like to add, you certainly can submit written testimony. I don't see any questions at this time. We'll move now to Senate Bill 400. Those who have signed up on this, I believe the first witness on this bill is Jordan Goyette. Welcome to the committee, Jordan Goyette. I believe we have on, you're speaking on 400, 399, 248, and 394. You may have 6 minutes as you're discussing four bills. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairwoman Coyne. I'll take way less time than that, but thank you very much. To speak on 394 first, I think it's really, as it's been said, really setting the bar low to have this facility, the Wyatt, inspected at least twice a year, especially with, given the history of it and all the allegations, especially during the last year of COVID and how it reacted under that, and the virus just really swept through the prison, and the actions of staff towards ICE detainees, especially in their custody, that I think really what this bill will do will really put on full notice. The only people resisting this would be people who have something inside that facility to hide, that they really don't want anybody to come in there and fully inspect the place. And to speak on the other three bills kind of collectively, because they go to the same thing, I think that financial institutions, obviously, we shouldn't allow any in the state to profit off of the incarceration of people for profit. That is basically takes away the purpose of incarcerating someone to eventually rehabilitate them, usually, and most of the time, and release them back in society, and then puts that institution has a profit motive to lock people up, to keep locking people up repeatedly, as many people as they can. And that's exactly why this institution takes in ICE detainees, too, because it's just more to pad their bottom line. And essentially, when we send people to these prisons, we send people to prison as punishment, not to be punished. And all too often in these facilities like the Wyatt, they are punished extensively because
these institutions will do anything they can to cut costs, cut corners, and pad their bottom line. And as far as S400 goes, as it's been said, you've heard from people who have family members who survived the Holocaust and talked about what led to the development of the final solution. And so many of us, including myself, especially during the last 4 years, sounded out how this agency was operating exactly like the Gestapo operated in Nazi Germany, or how the Tonton and Touquet operated under Papa Doc in Haiti in the 1960s and early 70s. Since we've sat back and watched and learned from those cases, we made the exact same mistake with the creation of ICE. We created an agency in 2003 that was essentially created under the shadow of the xenophobia that enveloped the country in the wake of 9/11. And it's done nothing but terrorize immigrant communities. It's really not met its point of removing and keeping people safe against violent criminals. And we shouldn't we should get out of the business of having our state cooperate with this agency willingly and helping them, like basically black bad people taking their kids to school or breaking down their doors like they're looking for a terror suspect, when really the person is likely just someone who has lived here the past 30 years and committed no other offenses purely than the purely administrative violation of being in this country without proper documentation. So I hope you'll strongly and swiftly pass all the bills and vote them through. And we need to shut down the Wyatt, and I thank you for the time. I'm by no means an expert on the topics, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for your testimony. I see no questions at this time. We'll move to our next witness, which I believe is Tal Frieden, representing Reclaim Rhode Island. Good evening. Welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. I believe we have Tal Frieden from Reclaim Rhode Island. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may begin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairwoman. My name is Tal Frieden, and I am proud to join dozens of Rhode Islanders from across the state in issuing written and verbal testimony in favor of shutting down the Wyatt. All have made it clear we need to shut down this facility. There's no place in our state for a facility like this. For me, the issue is personal. On August 16th, 2019, I kneeled on the crosswalk outside the Wyatt Detention Center, where over 36 people were participating in civil disobedience, shutting down the facility where a man named Jason died of medical neglect 10 years ago, and where over 120 people were being detained by ICE. I saw a bright light out of the corner of my eye and turned to see a 10,000-pound truck driving straight at me. I jumped out of the way. The truck stopped. Then the Wyatt prison guard, who was driving the truck, honked his horn and accelerated his vehicle into the crowd. While I moved to make sure no one was seriously injured, 12 Wyatt prison guards left their posts inside the prison, crossed the street, and fired pepper spray indiscriminately into the crowd. 5 people went to the hospital that night, including one woman who was 73 years old. The next morning, our group reconvened, and one question kept resurfacing. If this is how they treat us on the outside, what is the extent of the torture that they are performing behind the barbed wire? It didn't take us very long to find out. During the COVID crisis, hundreds of people were infected with the disease at the Wyatt Detention Center. Over 60 people went on hunger strike to protest the inhumane conditions, and one sewed his own mouth shut in protest of medical neglect. These stories are haunting, but unfortunately they are not unique. They remind me of the atrocities that my grandparents endured under Nazi rule, how their families were rounded up, forced to live in torturous conditions without medical attention and without any hope in sight. My grandmother told our family about surviving a Nazi labor camp, begging Nazi guards for food, for medical attention, for anything to keep them alive. This is the reality in the Wyatt Detention Center, and unfortunately, it is the reality in prisons across the United States, both public and private. The deportation machine and mass incarceration tear our communities apart, and we hear the echoes of slavery, Nazi genocide, and other historical injustices in these facilities. It's time that we stop relying on incarceration. It's time that we end the criminal injustice system and the deportation machine. The people of Central Falls deserve better. The people of Rhode Island deserve better. And all survivors and victims of state violence deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I see no questions at this time. Thank you again. Our next witness, I believe our next witness is Miguel Sanchez. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Senator. Hi, good evening, committee members. My name is Miguel Sanchez. I'm here as a Providence resident to testify in support of Senate Bill 400, which would prohibit Rhode Island prisons from working with ICE. I also support Senate Bills 248, 399, 539, and 772. Today I want to talk about an event that got me into community advocacy. The day was May 12, 2008, one day before my birthday. I was living in Iowa at the time. The horrendous event that I'm talking about was the post-bill ICE raid at the kosher meat plant, where over 400 Latinos were arrested and eventually deported. This was the largest single raid of a workplace in the U.S., and of course the millionaire owners weren't arrested or held accountable at all. As a 10-year-old boy, I was very confused and lost when this happened. My first thought was, people can get arrested for working? It was then that my mom explained to me the immigration laws and what racist agencies like ICE are. I realized how much unjust laws disproportionately affect black and brown folks across this country. ICE has a current budget of $7.5 billion. That money needs to go to fixing our broken immigration system. ICE has no place in Rhode Island, and to be honest, no place in this country. Passing this bill would be the first step in making that a reality. Thank you for your time, committee members.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. I don't see any questions at this time. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 539. Okay, stand by a moment. We're just trying to reach the next witness. We have our next witness, which is Hannah Stern, ACLU of Rhode Island, to speak on Senate Bill 539. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Stern. You have 3 minutes for your testimony on Senate Bill 539. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for your time this evening. My name is Hannah Stern, testifying on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island in strong support of this legislation. Discrimination on the basis of hair texture or protective hairstyle is really just a form of racial discrimination and is a very pervasive issue across this country. Just Googling hair discrimination will take you to numerous very distressing stories of, for example, particularly young black students being removed from class and disciplined solely for having the protective hairstyles, which would be protected from discrimination within this bill. These types of incidents of racial discrimination, we believe, demand distinct protections in our laws, and for these reasons, we urge passage of this very important legislation, which would explicitly and clearly codify those. So thank you very much for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of this witness? Okay, seeing none at this time, thank you for joining us, Hannah.
Thank you.
And with that, committee members, for both Committee on Judiciary and Finance, that was our last witness. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Senator Reptakis and seconded by Senator Rogers. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good.